Hello my loves, welcome back and welcome to my April 2025 bullet journal setup. I cannot believe we are already this far into the year and we're doing our fourth setup already. I feel like the past 2 months have gone by so fast, but I'm really excited about this theme for April. I was going back and forth a lot about what to do. As per usual, I am always stressing like the day or two before, trying to figure out something very last minute. And for some reason coming into April, I was thinking to myself, okay, January I did all red, February I did all teal, March I did all lavender. So I've been kind of doing very monochrome themes recently, and I was thinking about doing something very similar with April yet again and kind of continue that trend, but I was also thinking about doing something more in my usual quote-unquote comfort zone. And if you know me, you know my channel, that's basically pinks, beiges, and greens. And if you've seen the cover page of the setup from the thumbnail, you know that's where I ended up. Okay, I did. And honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing at all to stay in your comfort zone. I don't know. I feel like I've been quite experimental with my themes so far this year, and I've really enjoyed most of them, but I think that I was just kind of feeling something not necessarily simpler, but something that I'm more familiar with, and that is an alcohol marker art on a separate piece of paper using colors I'm familiar with and I know the palettes that I like, and then pasting it into the journal afterwards. So that's what I'm doing right now, and that's why I'm in a sketchbook, is because I'm going to be using alcohol markers to draw this girl twice. Actually, I'm doing two different images here, and I'm doing it on this sketchbook paper instead of in my journal because, as I say all the time, alcohol markers are very strong. They bleed through paper, so if I just draw it on a separate piece of paper and glue it in or paste it in, then it won't have to worry about bleeding, and I can get the same effect using the markers in this artwork without having to worry about it ruining my other journal pages. Anyway, so going back to my theme idea, right? A couple days ago, like a week ago, I was thinking like, okay, I want to do something related to Marie Antoinette. Why, you may ask? I don't know. I literally have no clue. I was just thinking that I wanted to draw some kind of historical figure in a huge ball gown, possibly with a lot of flowers and big hair, right? And as I always do, I was looking up on Pinterest inspiration photos for what I was thinking, looking at people who had already drawn Marie, looking up pictures of interpretations of Marie, even pictures of herself that she got painted. And I was thinking to myself, like, I really like these images, but I don't know if I'm feeling bright pink and flouncy, all the glitz and glamour that Marie had when she was Queen of France, right? And so I was thinking, okay, let's look more into just historical dress in general and not necessarily like Marie specifically. And so I went down this huge rabbit hole, and if you follow me on Pinterest, you probably saw this rabbit hole because I saved a lot of different photos of either drawings or AI generated photos of historical or inspired by historical wear, and just basically different girls, different characters wearing very beautiful gowns. Again, not always completely historically accurate, but inspired by. And so I came across this picture that I'll put here on the screen, which is an exact reference to what I'm drawing here. I took a lot of inspiration from that for the girl in this drawing. And basically, her outfit is inspired by Victorian wear, but it's not completely historically accurate. The photo itself, I'm pretty sure, is AI generated, so I don't have an artist to credit, but of course, if it's created by a computer, that means it took inspiration from some other unknown artists at one point. Because the dress is shorter, not fully to her feet, I would assume that this character is not like full grown. She's a little younger because younger like girls and teenagers had long dresses, but they didn't quite touch the floor. I would say this is also a quite casual dress in my opinion, but I think it still has enough flounce and enough detail to it for me to want to draw it. I thought it was a very beautiful color combination. I thought the flowers on the dress were super pretty. I love the sleeve combination. I think they're so cool. So this is where I started my idea, right? But I didn't want to just draw this picture and copy it. I wanted to do something a little more. So then I decided to add something else to the drawing. Well, first I added flowers. So there are a lot of flowers behind this girl, both in the portrait of her on the left and then the view from the back on the right. There are flowers surrounding her and also on her dress and also in the air, like petals, things like that. But going one step further, I was like, what can I tie into this historical-ish drawing of a girl, right? And I thought about quilting or sewing. And I'm not trying to say here that women were only supposed to be doing little lady things like sewing, right? I don't think that's right at all. I'm not trying to, revert into historical times of like women are best known for, crafting and cooking only. But I would say that I think it's very popular to think that women in the Victorian era made a lot of sewn, handmade crafts, and quilts being one of them. Along with that, my mother actually, like right now, my mom, has a quilt shop in our hometown, and so she has been quilting for years and years and years. She's taught me and my sister how to sew. I don't particularly love quilting, but I can do it if I wanted to. And so I got inspiration from like number one, her, and number two, the idea that if this was a picture of an actual lady from the Victorian era, she probably has made a quilt once or twice in her life before, So basically, behind her in this oval and also in this long tall strip on the right, I am drawing this very, very basic quilt. Now again, I've known how to quilt for years and I've known how to sew for years, so you would think that I would be able to draw a quilt pattern more detailed than this. Unfortunately, I did something incredibly simple and still messed it up when I was coloring it in. Yeah, I did. So it's basically just blocks. They're about 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, and then each block has a diamond in the middle. And the idea was every other block should have the diamond colored in, and then the other blocks in between those should have the outside of the diamond colored in, right? And then the colors would go back and forth between the maroons, the greens, the beiges, the light pinks, things like that I'm going to be coloring in the girl and her outfit with, right? Well, you will see this in just a few minutes. I haven't quite gotten there in the coloring process yet, but for some reason, in the process of switching markers and trying to keep the pattern straight in my head while having the girl overlap both sides, I got turned around, twisted up. So the pattern is very simple, and yet the coloring is still inconsistent. If I was actually making a quilt, I would have to think a lot more into where the colors are going, where the pattern is, etc. Maybe later in the month I will try to draw more detailed quilts, but for this one I did something very simple and still messed up. So I think, however, it gives the illusion of a quilt, and that's the important part. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be quite patchwork. It can be quite messy. It's okay. I'm all right with it. It's just kind of funny that I'm like, I did something very simple and it still didn't turn out perfect. Now I am working backwards with this voiceover a little bit because I'm talking about the quilt that I'm not coloring yet instead of the outfit that I am coloring. So we'll talk about that for a minute. The girl is obviously very pale with dark hair, so I used about 3 different shades of light beige and pink for her skin color and then 2 shades of dark brown for her hair. For the dress, I'm using 1 light maroon for almost the entire dress except for the sleeves and then the cover on the front. I don't know what that's called. I will look it up and try to find a professional name for that. But yeah, there is a lot of beige and almost like off-white moments kind of popping out as well from the dress. And then she has this kind of overskirt that's like tied around the waist, and it has 2 panels on the left and right. So that's why you can see a little bit of the dress in the front and back, but there are still panels of darker brown. In the original image, it was insinuated that this was like a transparent see-through fabric, so you could still see the original dress through it. For easiness sake, I made it more of a completely opaque material, a completely solid fabric, so I wouldn't have to continue to draw the flowers on the dress, which is supposed to be like the pattern of the fabric under the brown as well. It's just under the maroon. But either way, I think that there is enough detail in the line art from this image to make everything pop. It doesn't have to have a lot of detail in the coloring. I would basically just use usually 2, occasionally 3, but mostly 2 shades of similar colors. For example, like the dress, right? I would do 1 entire color swath of the maroon color, and I would go in once more with a slightly darker brown to add shadows where the belt is, where the ruffles of the skirt overlap each other, especially in the sleeve with all of the gathering and flouncing. That's where I'd add a little bit of shadow, and if I wanted to blend a little more, I could go back in with my original maroon and add a little bit of blending. But to be honest, because the drawing is so detailed and small in particular, and the spaces where I was actually coloring are quite small, it didn't require a lot of shading to make the image come across. You could really see the shape of the gown, the shape of her outfit, her pose in the line art itself with the details of the flowers and everything. And I don't think it required much coloring to make this come to life. The specifics are in the black line art. Now, I do recognize that whenever I draw something outside of my bullet journal in a sketchbook, it usually takes me a lot longer than when I do in the sketchbook, which is why we are still this far into the video and we haven't actually touched my journal again. I realize that it's a little bit weird. However, it's because in real life, this does take me a long time. I had to film this like Thursday before this was published. It's like I'm doing this very last minute this week. I'm very busy this week. I couldn't get around to doing it last week because I was traveling, etc. So basically, I was trying to film this video in the span of 3 hours between like 10:30, 11 in the morning to like 1:30 p.m. before I had class at 2. And so I gave myself that time. I was like, okay, I pretty much am positive that I can finish the drawing in an hour and a half. I can get the other stuff done in like 45 minutes. I'll be done in under 3 hours, right? Well, it turns out the drawing itself took me about 2 hours to do all this, and it's sped up a lot. So you guys don't have to see the raw footage, obviously, but I, for some reason, whenever I'm drawing on camera, draw a lot slower than I do in real life. I think because I'm more particular about like perfectionism and stuff. And so this did take me me a long time to do and to perfect and, you know, figure out all the shading and the line art and the highlights with the white gel pen that I'm going to do in just a minute and all that stuff. Although it is annoying that you guys are, you know, still not at the bullet journal yet. We will get there in a minute, I promise, but also keep in mind that this took me hours. And by the time that I finished the artwork and the stuff in my bullet journal, I was like rushing to finish the rest of the spreads before I had to go to class. I was like, all right, finish this, go grab food and go to class, like within 30 minutes. I was almost late. I wasn't late, okay? I made there on time, but just know that I was really pushing it. All right, so now we're basically finished, finally, and we're cutting out all of the drawings from the paper. Now, I used to do my alcohol marker drawings on sticker paper because it would make it really easy to just peel off the back of the paper and stick it into my journal. If you don't know, the sticker paper actually has a sticky back to it, so it makes life super easy. And I am always tempted to do that now because it is just so much easier. But I've realized over time that thicker paper, like sketchbook paper or mixed media paper, absorbs the marker so much better than the sticker paper. So in an effort not to make the coloring from these pictures bleed onto the other page of the journal whenever the journal is closed, I do it on separate paper like this and paste it in, or I guess tape it in with double-sided tape. Usually it's very easy, very strong. This tape is, I think it's just Scotch tape. I bought it for a couple dollars at the nearest, you know, CVS. It's not too hard to acquire, but it makes it, you know, very secure in the journal. So basically I cut out the first picture, which is the portrait of the girl, right? And I keep calling her the girl. I don't have a name for her in my head, but if you would like to name her in the comments below, I would love to hear any suggestions. The only thing I prefer is that she has a slightly Victorian name, because obviously she is this Victorian character. Now, does it piss me off just a little bit that the paper that I used for my sketchbook is a little bit too warm for the journal paper? So you can definitely see where all the white space around my drawing contrasts the paper of the journal because it's just a little bit too yellow. Yeah, it pisses me off a little bit. And I realized that although I've used this exact paper before, usually whenever I cut out my art, I cut closer to the body of the character, so you really don't see that much white paper. But in this situation, because I had the border around, like the big rectangle border around the picture as well, I wanted to include that in the drawing, so that caused me to keep more negative space and more white space to really emphasize that this paper does not match. So that's one more reason why I'd also maybe prefer to use sticker paper, because I feel like sticker paper is more of that cooler tone, whereas my sketchbook paper is a little more warm toned. That being said, however, it honestly is not that big of a deal. It is only noticeable whenever like I bring it up. I'm sure if I didn't say anything, you wouldn't even have noticed. So I'm trying to accept the imperfections in my journal and move along with it. On the left, I have my quick little calendar. It's quite small, but you know, does the job for me. On the days of the month where I don't have, it's not April, like at the top where it's March, or the bottom where it's May, I am basically coloring in those blocks with the exact same quilt pattern that I had on the right. Again, it's not perfect, but I kind of leaned into the messiness, the patchiness of it, the scrapbookness of it, and just kind of colored in random blocks in those sections. And then I wanted a little more contrast, so I used a dark brown for the very top where all the dates are. You may not be able to read like the Monday through Sunday lettering, but I honestly don't even need to read it because I know that I start my calendars on a Monday and on a Sunday. So sometimes not even put that bar at the top. I know which days are which. Moving into the second page. Now I'm about to tell you something that you're going to hate me for saying this, but unfortunately it is true. I pasted in this second picture crooked. And I didn't realize that I did so until hours after filming. I finished filming, I went to class, I came back, I got my bullet journal, I was going to use it, and I realized that this picture was pasted in crooked. Basically, I usually like to paste things aligned with the dot grid on the journal, but the top part of the picture was 3 dot spaces in from the edge of the journal, and the bottom was 2. Now, because it's such a long piece, it was hard to notice at first, especially because I'm sitting at an angle away from the journal whenever I film. I can't put my head directly over the journal, right, because that's where the camera is. I have to kind of lean back a little bit, so it was hard for me to notice. But once I finished filming and I realized, I was like, oh shoot, this is crooked, and it really annoyed me. So I didn't do this on camera. Off camera, I did carefully remove that double-sided tape and adjust it so that it is straight, because if it was crooked my entire life, it would incredibly irritate me. But unfortunately in this video, I don't have footage of me fixing it. If it's annoying you that it's crooked, it was annoying me too. I'm terribly sorry, but trust it is fixed, and you will see in the flip through in a couple months of my full bullet journal, all 6 months so far of the year, you'll see it's fixed, okay? Now this page is my tracker page. On the left, I have 4 different habit trackers, and on the right, I have my academic planner that I use to plan out all of my academics for the month. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. One thing I am missing this month is an expenses tracker, and that's just because I've been very inconsistent with tracking my expenses tracker recently. It's been a lot of catching up after like a month because I forgot to edit it during the month. And so honestly, I'm just trying to simplify my process this month and not add anything that I may not use. Obviously, expenses trackers are very helpful to look at, especially when you're trying to manage your money better. And for me, as I'm in college, I'm always trying to make sure I'm keeping to a budget, things like that. But because I wasn't keeping up with it consistently, it was kind of a waste of time. So for this month, maybe for future ones, I'm just going to take it away. But I specifically want a habit tracker and an academic planner for this month. That'll really help me for, of course, finishing out my second spring semester of college and also keeping up with my daily habits. Well, that's it for this setup. I really hope you enjoyed. I think it looks super pretty. I'm quite happy with it. This video was a little short, I do agree, but that's because next week I'm going to be posting my weekly spreads for April. So if you don't want to miss it, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell so you'll see when it comes out next Saturday. Have an amazing day, and I will see you next week.